today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Sandi Brock, who is a Canadian sheep and grain farmer. And actually, I want to point out that up until today, I had not spoken with any Canadians, but you're my second for the day. So that's a big day for the Canadians.
It is putting us on the map.
Exactly. I'm doing my best. But Sandi, if you can maybe just get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself, and we will go from there.
Sure. My name is Sandi Brock. I am a sheep and grain farmer. We live in Ontario. I believe you might have been interviewing Leslie. So she's
Yes.
a few provinces west of me. So we are in southwestern Ontario. If you drew a line right across Lake Huron, we are right beside Saginaw, Michigan, if you can envision that's where we are. And my husband and I run about 1,700 acres of grain crops. So we grow wheat, corn, soybeans, edible beans. We did winter canola for the first time this year, and some hay for the sheep, and cover crops in between. So I feel like we're planting from basically April till October some years, and some years later if it's a bad fall. And then the sheep are kind of a new venture. The farm was always a grain. It originally was a grain farm, so it always will be probably. The sheep are a new addition in 2012, and it's like kind of been just trying to figure out life on a sheep farm. I've never grew up on a sheep farm, so I've learned everything from scratch.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I think is amazing for how far you guys have come, and the presence you have. But did you, like, growing up, did you know you wanted to be involved in agriculture? Were you involved in agriculture? How did that all kind of get you to where you are today?
Sure. Definitely born and raised in a barn. Literally, I spent more time in the barn or in our hay mow or out in the fields than I definitely did in the house, which has proved to be my lifelong legacy, because this house is, it's not good. That's for another podcast, therapy. No, I grew up on a dairy farm about an hour and a half southeast of here. And my family, my father's family and my mom's family, a few generations of dairy for sure. And dad had 3 girls. So we were product of the 80s. The 80s meant high interest rates and not a lot of help. So we were not treated any differently. Lots of fighting with dad, lots of mom being in the middle, and but it did definitely make us who we are today, which is definitely, we work hard, we work before we get to do anything, which has stayed with me my whole life. So I can play hard, but I have to make sure all the chores are done first.
Absolutely. So, yep.
Did I always know? I think I always knew I wanted to be in agriculture. I just didn't know what that would look like. I never really did have that strong sense of how I was going to fit. I guess for the longest period, I probably wanted to be a dairy farmer because it's all I knew. And it goes to speak to, we are definitely a product of how we're raised and all we know. And I see that more now as a 45-year-old as definitely I did, even as a young mom. I still didn't see it, but I see it now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I can relate to that as well, being somebody who grew up in agriculture, but didn't really know, okay, how do I fit into all of this in the grand scheme of things? So you, like you said, had a background in dairy and now sheep. And I think I read somewhere at one time you may have been involved in poultry too. So with knowing so much about all of these different species, what are maybe some differences that you've seen kind of across the board in being involved in these different aspects within the agriculture industry?
So right away, the biggest difference in Canada is the dairy and the poultry that I was involved in, which was the broiler breeder industry, which is a really cool, challenging industry, not at all like broilers or layers. They're kind of a marriage of the two, but they're a real science and an art to figure out how to get them to produce well and to keep them healthy and happy. So a lot of stuff that I've taken from that broiler breeder world, I've really been able to use in my sheep business for sure. I would say right away though, the poultry and the dairy are protected a little bit in Canada. We do pay for that protection, which is supply management. We're one of the only, maybe the only country left that still does have that. And I know that people in the industry are very happy to have it. I do miss that protection a little bit, but in the same breath, I do like the freedom of being able to do whatever we want with our product. We can be as creative as we want. We can have value added products. We're not really at the mercy of, we can only produce this for this particular place that it has to go.
Right.
So I guess that's the biggest difference that me as a farmer can see. There years and times that that I wish I still had that protection as a family. 100%. Like, it would be nice to, have that backing when you go to a bank, even just that, and all that is business risk.
Right.
And Mark and I have just found other ways to manage risk. We fight for risk, politically, but even at the end of the day, I think even if we could not have to rely politically or anything on, and figure out a way to diversify ourselves so we protect our own risk, then I think that's how we look at it now as a couple and as a working partner.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting point. Just obviously differences between the two different countries and farming, the industry between the two as well. But how did you guys get into sheep? With all of these different backgrounds, how did you land with sheep?
So I'm going to have to go back. I graduated in 1998 from University of Guelph. So I did my agriculture business degree, and I met my husband there. He came home a little bit before me, so he was already kind of settled at home. So I knew I wanted to come here to live with him on his home farm. They were doing grain. He sold Pioneer Seed corn.
Oh, okay.
Corn, soybeans, wheat. And so he was kind of already established. But when I came home, the only jobs really that were available to me when I graduate was like a banker. Like that was the job that all my peers were kind of heading towards. And that was not my thing at all. I was like, no, it's hard enough sitting editing videos for hours and hours.
Right.
I could not imagine being in an office.
Sitting in a bank.
Oh no. And dealing with money. No. There'd be a lot of broke farmers out there. So I just knew that wasn't in the cards for me. His mom and dad had just recently, in 1997, at that point when I graduated, had bought a very, very large broiler breeder farm. So it was like 120,000 units, 10 barns, 50-ish employees. It was a huge undertaking. It was in rough shape. And by the time I graduated, I kind of had my eye on that, thinking, that looks like a real cool challenge. Mm-hmm. And I just literally stopped by their office one day. I'm like, can I work for you, even if it's for like nothing? Because I just want to work here. And they were like, yeah, we can't afford to pay you much, but we need the help. And that was the best experience of my life, because we were so close to being bankrupt. Like there is nothing in this world that will push you and show you how resilient you are until your back is right against the wall. And it really did feel like we turned a Titanic at that point in our life. And I stuck with it for about 13 years. We started, we got out of the basement and we actually expanded and grew. And then it got to a point where our family was growing. I was also working with Mark's brother and Mark's dad, and we were all just kind of just drifting in different angles, different interests. And we just sat down and started doing some succession work. Probably the way we finally did split wasn't a great day, but here we are 8 years later, and we are all a family again and happy, and it was probably the best decision ever. So it was scary at the time. It was very sad. I was not real well for a couple years after it, and now looking back, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad we just ripped off the Band-Aid and did it.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
growing pains for something different and something bigger, right?
Right, right.
So from that, what made you, was there something about sheep that interested you to, what made you decide out of all the animals and all the things, I'm going to pick those?
Well, the sheep was my husband's idea.
Okay.
He just, because a couple months of not being in the chicken barns, just helping Mark in the fields, I'm like, I love this, but it's not my passion. I need to be in a barn. We knew anything that required quota was out. It was out. We can afford it. We couldn't get in. It's hard to get in it if you don't have ties in it already. And just financially, we were not able to do it. So we knew that was off the table. Beef cows, to me, growing up in dairy, I'm like, they're too big for me. Like, I'm such a wuss. Not that I'm scared of them, but I'm like, I don't know yeah.
They're a lot to handle alone.
They're a lot, and they'd look at me and laugh. So Mark was like, what do you think of sheep? I always thought sheep were kind of cool. I'm like, sheep have never been on my radar. And he sent me off to an extension infrastructure course. It was like a 2-day course. And we started touring some sheep barns. And I'm like, and of course they were nice modern barns. And immediately I just felt like, I don't know what clicked, but I'm like, I can see myself doing this.
I can do this. Yeah.
And there was not even a hesitation in my mind that that's what I wanted to do. It was the weirdest thing. And then after I got sheep, I'm like, what was I thinking? Because it was not what I expected. Yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely unique, that's for sure, compared to the other species.
Yes. And really only people that have had sheep really can get it. But it turns out I really like them. I kind of understand them most days, and it takes a while, but you figure the little creatures out for sure.
So this is kind of a loaded question in some ways, but sheep farming on a large scale isn't super common in the United States as far as from a commercial standpoint, I would say. Most flocks here have some element of like a show industry involvement. But what really goes into a commercial flock on the scale that you guys are doing this on?
Well, definitely we looked at the whole operation as a business,
right?
And pounds out the door, conversion rates, you know, and just having a healthy flock. So for me, and show people, like, I get the show industry and I get what they're trying to do. I mean a show is just literally you're showcasing what you've worked really, really hard to make.
Right.
And so I get it. I used to show dairy cows, so I through 4-H, so I understand that industry. The disconnect a little bit is that a commercial farm is very, very reliant on those genetics to get to improve and increase our production on these commercial farms. Because we're doing the same things. We want the same things. We want good gains. We want all these things. The difference might just be, okay, that's Suffolk. I see the potential on the market side, but I don't really care for the way, I don't want to really feed an animal that big. What would she be like if I bred her to this, little smaller Rito, which is like a polypay maybe to you guys. You start playing a little more with different breeds and you mix them. So that would be, purebred isn't like that. Purebred is trying to find those good pure genes on that animal. And I really can't even speak for the purebred industry because I've never been involved with it in sheep. I've only been commercial. So I guess for me, I just like to find I always call it the magic animal that raises her lamb really well. That lamb can either be kept back for replacement ewe if she's a she, or she or he can grow really, really well into a market lamb within the first, 4 months of life. And for me, that gets the most value out of the acres that we reserve for growing crops, and the quickest return, I guess is how I look at it anyway. I don't think the differences need to be as much as we say they are between commercial and purebred. We just have different business models. Theirs is to produce stock for us.
Right.
Ours is to create an end product that our producer and our retail store wants. And we want to do it in a way that's quick enough that we're still, it's the animal is healthy, and it's an economical amount of time.
Right. And I think people sometimes don't understand the whole business aspect to agriculture and farming and the livestock industry, because at the end of the day, like, you still have to be able to feed your family in order to help feed other families.
Right.
So that whole dynamic of it all, I think, is very important to keep in mind. And it's great to have you explain it like that, because I think it makes logical sense from what you're doing in your operation.
Yeah, I like when people want to get into sheep, I'm like, be careful not to just fall in love with the idea of sheep. And I know my channel, like my YouTube channel, I know that it's hard because I have such a vast audience, but if they're following me and they just want to get in the sheep industry because they're like, oh, the lambs are really cute and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, don't start there. Start with a business plan.
Right.
Like, start with a business plan, because there's so many in Ontario, in Canada, that like it's a revolving door of producers coming in and going out. And that's the one fallback of our industry, is that it's easy to get in and it's easy to get out. And what happens is we get in really excited. We want to get in as fast as we can because the market's good, or whatever the climate looks like. But we don't take the time and research, what is a stock that would fit me management wise? What is a stock that will, that I either want to put out on grass or I want in a barn? What does that look like? How quickly do I want them out the door, because my facility doesn't handle them past a certain age? There's all these factors that have to go in it to make a business decision, because what can happen is, if you haven't, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you don't even see coming,
Right.
but if those core root values of why you want sheep business wise, if anything goes sideways, you're out the door, because it's easy to get out again.
Mm-hmm.
For me, we invested hard and fast, so for me that was, I'm stuck. I'm not getting out because I have a lot of bills to pay.
Right.
Yeah, so that's one way to make sure you're committed, is to like go into a lot of debt. However, yeah, so I always tell people, do the economics first and talk to people you trust in the industry.
For sure. And I think that's in any anything within the industry, when you're trying to get in, and obviously you have to make it sure, like you said, it's economical for yes, the lambs are cute and fuzzy, but you have to be able to feed them and feed their moms and maintain the whole line of supply chain through it all.
That's right.
So with lambs, first of all, I would like you to give your definition of lamb as far as a meat product, because I think it's very different across the board, and it's also very different from what a consumer generally would think of when they hear the word lamb.
I know, it's the stupidest name. I don't know who made a baby name the same name as like almost a full grown animal that you're
right.
gonna eat. So beef cows did it right. Like, they're cattle, calves, and beef.
Right.
Like that like, da-da-da, why haven't we thought it? And no one wants to eat mutton. We got to just make mutton cool.
Yeah.
But it's not. So yeah, the weight that I ship my lambs. So in Ontario, there's different weight ranges. So there are lambs for certain cultures. They do prefer a lighter lamb. So you are looking at like a weaned lamb, so probably around 50 to 60 pounds. But those ones could be, a lot of those are 2 months old. So it's not like they're lambs, like on mommy. Yeah.
Fresh on the ground.
50 pounds, if you can think of 50 pounds. And then there's ranges, almost like 10-pound ranges up to about 120 pounds, say. And I'm at the higher end. So I call mine heavy. So they're usually about 105 pounds is kind of my goal, live weight. So that's how big they are. And if you think of a mature ewe, like a mature ewe in my barn is probably 150 pounds, 150, 160 pounds, like a few years old.
Mm-hmm.
So you're 3/4 of the way there. So, and I think that's what consumers don't really understand with most processors, the stuff you see at grocery stores, most retailers like to buy lamb on a like those heavier animals because like you're processing, you're getting a lot more meat for that one animal that you have to process.
Exactly.
So it doesn't make sense to do a 50-pound lamb because you're only going to get, you don't have much meat on a 50-pound lamb.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for you guys, is it a specialty market, or like how is your meat, I guess, put into the mainstream of the supply chain?
Sure. So where I am is kind of it's kind of a success story really for Canada. We are really close to Toronto. I'm only about 2 hours west of Toronto, and we have an enormous demand for lamb because we have a lot of immigration into Canada, a lot of first generation, second generation new Canadians that lamb has been their staple food, even like where they are from, their country, their culture. Some don't eat beef, obviously, and so it's a real, there's a lot of potential, and I guess that was part of the reason we went into it, because it was one of the only markets that was still, besides poultry, that's still kind of on the rise.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of a success story for Ontario. So most of mine go to, there's nothing really special about it. I like to sell mine. I like to fill my trailer because again, it's economy, it's business. I like to keep my freight down, and you can only do that if a lot of them are ready at the same time to go. I take mine to a sales barn. So I don't take mine just directly to a packing plant. I have been involved in some direct to packer buying groups.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with me, it was just a little too far. So my freight was getting too high, and our auction prices were competitive. So I've just continued to go to my auction barn. It's only half an hour drive, 35-minute drive, and I can do it after my day. So it just works out well for me. But I do love the direct to packer programs. It's a little more, again, it's that managing your risk and doing that internally instead of relying on government or relying on other people to do it. So they're pretty cool. We've got 2 producer run direct to packer groups that are doing really, really well in Ontario. And that's, producers saying, I don't want to rely on other people. I want to make this happen. I want to help other farmers. So I really love, it's such a success story.
That's awesome. That's a really cool kind of facet of it, because it's very different, I think, from United States. Obviously we have lamb and all of that, but I think it's a little bit more, I don't want to say mainstream, but it is a little bit more kind of, I think, in it sounds like in your area and for what you guys are doing. Switching gears a little bit, you mentioned filming the trailer. So if whoever's listening or watching is unaware, Sandi is a YouTube sensation in my book.
Doesn't ever feel like that.
She shares her story on YouTube. So my question is, how did you decide you were going to start doing that?
YouTube has been, it was always kind of on the back burner just because my kids are now almost 20 and 18. And I mean, they grew up watching YouTube. That's all. They never really watched TV after Dora the Explorer and like SpongeBob were done. There was like no need to have even a satellite for TV. So they were always on YouTube. So it was always kind of one of those, I didn't understand it. I'm just like, what are you watching? Oh, I'm watching this family. I'm like, oh, who is it? And it's like, I don't know. They're just a random family. And I'm like, I don't get that. So
it's such a weird dynamic.
It's so weird. And I can totally, yeah. Anyway, and now that I'm in it, it's like I can see other people having the same reaction. And then 5 years later, that's all you watch is YouTube. So I guess that it was an early implant of that YouTube has my kids' full attention for hours at a time, and so I just kind of put it on the back burner, and then just playing around with apps on my phone, right? Like, so everybody starts with Facebook, and then you go over to Twitter, and then my kids are using Snapchat, so I kind of went over there because of this whole videoing thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, so I just started playing with the filters, just having fun with it, and just bringing it to the barn. And because sheep are ridiculous, and they're fun.
Yeah.
And I started to kind of grow a little bit of an audience, and they just wanted to know more. And I had all these like all these conversations, like, and I was like, there's something to this. And then it just kind of from there, I actually started Googling like farm women vlogging YouTube, and there
Mhm.
was not like,
Nothing.
there
Yeah.
wasn't a lot. And I'm
Yeah.
like, because I only wanted to see like what they were doing. And I'm like, why? There's no one in the space. What is going on? Um, and then I reached out to Cody Creelman, who's a vet in Alberta, and not thinking he'd ever respond back, because it's one of
Right.
those things you watch their videos and you're like,
Yeah.
you're totally invested in their
Yeah.
family. And I'm like, oh, he'll never answer me. Well, he totally answered me right away. He's like, I was, he's like, oh, I follow you on Snapchat. And then he's like, you just have to start. And so I played around for months, probably a year, before I actually posted my first video, because I hated it. Hated my voice. I hated my
Oh,
face. I'm so animated, like, oh, and now I'm so used to it. It's just like whatever. But so that's kind of how I got started. I just kind of was playing around with other apps that you can erase as soon as you do it, right? Like
mhm.
you're like, oh, I can't post that. And I don't know, you develop some really close relationships just virtually by doing that. And my goal and my mission with it all is for someone to watch me on film, meet me in real life, and not know the difference. And that to me is real. And that, I think that is what our consumers and our, I don't even like calling them our consumers, just our friends that like to eat what we make, or even just to follow the story. They're our community now. And that's been my goal from the start, is just to really develop a community, instead of instead of being fearful or scared of what we're doing because we're not talking about it, they have empathy because we're taking them through the whole thing. And it means, yeah, I think that's how you connect with people, is you can't, like, I look like this every day. Like I don't get dressed, and for those that do, I don't begrudge that either, but I do want it to be me.
Right.
Like I don't want to be any different online than I am in real person, because that's in real life, because that's where we run into trouble.
Right. And I think that's exactly what you said, where the connections, I think people have to feel like they can trust you in order to invest themselves in, obviously your content and everything, but kind of buy in on what you're not really trying to sell. But yeah, you are trying to sell your product and your lifestyle and what you're trying to build a business on. So I think trying to reach, and what we always, people in agriculture always talk about, we need to reach the consumer, we need to figure out how to burst through this bubble, and it's such a hard thing. But I think if you attack it in the way of, I'm trying to burst through this bubble, it makes it a challenging thing, when like you're exactly like you're doing, you're just being you and sharing your story and being real and making connections, and that's the best way to share what you're doing and what.
Well, and I think you've got something there, that we keep being drilled that we got to break through our whatever. And it's like, ask yourself why.
Right.
What is it you want? Is it just to be loved? You got to earn that,
Mm-hmm.
because there's been enough people that represent us, or that do really kind of crappy things, that we have a big hole to dig ourselves out of. So decide what is it that you want. Are you going to go online and just defend everything that your industry does, when sometimes some of the stuff is not defendable?
Right.
You got to be very, very careful. And I guess I sit back and watch other people. I give people credit for trying to take on the world. I look at it differently, because I feel like everyone, okay, there's vicious people that just, it's not worth it,
Mm-hmm.
because you're focusing attention to people that don't deserve your time. So, I sit back a bit, and partly that, and I'm just really sheepish. I don't like conflict, and but I do think that you can reach them in different ways. And I think at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, what is it you're wanting to do? Like, you're making content to break out of your bubble to do what?
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
what are you trying to do? For me, from the very beginning, I just want to tell a story. I
Right.
want to be a storyteller. I want to write a book in real life,
For
in
format.
video
Right.
form, because I don't have time to sit and write a book and I get too distracted. Um, so that's where it has started. And as the community grows and the people get to love you for who you are, and they become your cheerleaders, they then tell you what they want. So
Exactly.
yes, I don't have to make lamb, and I don't have to make socks, and I don't have to make a wool sweater if my people didn't if they're not asking for it.
Yep.
So yeah, like last year we did black beans for the first time. We harvested some black beans, and people are like, "Oh, we put black beans in everything. Would you ship us some?" They're asking for a product that we never in a million years. That's not why we grew it. We were just going to grow it as a commodity, ship it out. It's like, so then the wheels start turning. It's like, well, could we could we package it, put our label on it, and ship it because it's a dry product? Sure, we can. And we've got people that want it. So all of a sudden, these little advantages of all this work of connecting and answering comments and answering DMs, it means something because you're actually providing them with what they've asked you for, right? And they're
Yep.
not even content. They're not going to click and follow you unless they're asking for that. Like everyone else will just skip by and go, yeah, you're a crazy sheep lady or whatever. But some people are like, I want to see what she's doing today.
Right.
And that's service.
Yep. Well, you have to have some level of investment, right, to hit the follow and continue to follow somebody. I mean, it's just as easy to unfollow somebody. So.
That's right. And that took me a long time to realize. It's like, I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And I have to really, in my mind's eye, I always have to, when I'm writing a post or when I'm doing a video, I have to always in my mind's eye envision the person that wants to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of focusing on, oh, I have to be a certain way in case my friend so and so is watching, I don't want her to take it the wrong way. Or I'm like, she's not watching. Like, let's just focus on those ones I can see in front. I don't know, you just get like a mind's eye. I have to do that mentally because it can be really hard.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think it's easy to get kind of caught up in what everybody else is doing and the image everybody else is trying to portray, but just kind of trying to stay true to what you initially started it for and reach the audience that your goal is to reach, I guess.
That's right. And it's hard when you're in a growth mentality all the time too, because my problem is the people that I watch on YouTube is to help me with my channel. So all they do is talk about growth. And then I go to my analytics on stuff and I'm one of these self-defeatist people. Like if I see arrows down, I'm done. Everyone hates me. It's like, no, they don't like that video.
Yeah.
Move on, make your next video. But I get so stuck in, I'm like, oh, everyone hated it. It's a bad thumbnail. It's a bad content. And like, I am not in the right business because it's probably going to drive me crazy or, but that's the problem. So then you get into this growth, and it's like farming too. You get into growth. You got to do this, and you got to be on this hamster wheel. And after a while, like Mark and I are at the stage now, we're like, we don't want to grow. We want to get better at what we have. We really want to just, do what we're doing better. And I think the same thing, I'm trying to have that same mindset in my YouTube channel. I've got a huge audience who love me. I would rather have people there who want to be there instead of blowing up and having all these trolls that I don't want there. I do not have the skin to be thick enough to handle that. So you have to be really careful when the stuff you watch is all about growth, or you see other creators just blowing up and you're like, oh, well, that's what I want. Actually, you don't probably.
Yeah.
You really do want to just, service the people that want to be there.
Right. As long as it's a meaningful kind of connection, I think, then those sometimes are more impactful than the mass quantities of them.
Yes, for sure.
Changing gears just slightly, you mentioned, you want to tell a story and you want to be a storyteller. So you actually did write a children's book though, correct?
A
And so
long time ago.
can we just maybe quickly touch on that, and what kind of your thought process was behind that and why you decided to do that?
Sure. So it's funny. The book is funny because I use humor when I'm feeling really vulnerable. That's kind of my thing. Like I'll just try to be funny when I'm feeling nervous or I'm feeling lonely or I'm feeling a little lost. And I literally, like, when you're young, when, like, I guess when I had young kids and I feel like I was here and there and everywhere, I just didn't feel like I was doing anything well at all. Like, felt like I was failing at being a mom, failing at being a manager of the chicken barns, failing at being a wife, failing at helping him in the fields when he needed help. And you just feel this constant pull. And my mom, I'd visit my mom once in a while. She goes, "Oh my God, you should write a book." And I'm like, "I should." And I literally sat down and just wrote a poem, basically. And I'm like, "That's gonna be a children's book." And I did it in 3 days maybe. And then my friend is an artist, not an artist. She'd never call herself an artist, but I think she's an artist. But she knows me and she knew me at that state in my life. And I said, "I want you to make me as messy and crazy as you possibly can." So she sketched it. And I went to a local printer and I just said, "I want to make this into a book." So they just printed it into a book. And yeah, it's yeah, it's a quirky little tribute to where I was in my life. Um, and looking at it now, I mean, it's funny and lighthearted and but I know the state I was in when I wrote it, and I wasn't actually in a very in a very good state. So
Right.
it's kind of a funny thing to see now. It's like, oh yeah,
Funny
it's amazing
milestone to
to
look
do.
back on.
Hmm.
So last kind of question to wrap things up here. But what is your favorite part about being a woman in agriculture?
My favorite part. Um, it's most definitely not, like, I love that we have a group of women that are very proud to be women in agriculture. This whole women in agriculture, I'm like, we've always been in agriculture. Like I literally grew up in a barn. We did all the chores. Like I feel very not hypocritical. I don't know the word. Like I feel very phony saying those words because I feel like it's a bit of a tribe.
Right.
And I feel like an outsider because I just I don't see myself as the, like, that kind of person. And yet I've had, my email is full of messages from 12-year-old girls who, so I connect with 12-year-old girls apparently, who are just like, they're like, "Really, I really love your YouTube channel. I want to be a sheep farmer when I grow up." And I'm like,
Oh my gosh, that's
okay,
so
there's got to be something there. It's like, and maybe it's just the fact that they can relate to me because I'm not a guy, I guess. But, and that's the biggest thing about being authentic and not putting on a show for the camera, because I've got all these young eyes on me and I want them to see, like, when I cry, I want them to see that that's a part of it. I want them to see that you're not dressed up, it's not a glamorous job. Half the jobs you're doing, you're in up into your knees in dirt and manure and grease, and they still want to do it at the end of the day. And so for that, then I'm very proud to be a woman in agriculture. But I get very sheepish just talking about what that means, because I've just not known anything different. But I've talked to so many women in the industry that have definitely different experiences, and that's, I'm just naive to it.
Mhm.
And developing networks and relationships with the women that have had to really blaze a path for us. I get it. I appreciate it, because thank God my dad wasn't like that. Like I I think I'm a very lucky woman to not have had the challenges that a lot of women have had and still have. So yeah, and I've only surrounded myself with men that believe in me. I married a man that I work side by side with, that doesn't treat me like I can't do it.
Hmm.
And I was raised by one. So it's all on your experiences and how you were raised is how it embeds in your brain.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you pretty much just hit the nail on the head with that. I think it's exactly what you said. It's your experiences, and I think this whole women in agriculture movement, and if you want to call it that, I don't know, that sounds very strong,
I
but
know.
it's personally, I think it's about showing women that they can be involved and they don't have to just be a farm wife, where that is a super important role on the farm, but there's so many more things that you can be involved in, and not to be afraid to kind of speak your voice or share your voice, and find your kind of role in your operation or agriculture as a whole. So I couldn't agree more with you on that. Sandi, I want to thank you for your time today. I know you're busy with harvest and everything going on.
Not yet. It's
Well, it's
wet.
starting, right? We're starting, getting close.
Soon. We're just waiting for the weather. We're finally getting the rain that we needed in like July. So of course that's when it happens.
Yeah, we're getting it here too right now. But where can people connect with you if they want to kind of follow along?
Sure. YouTube is the thing that that's my bread and butter, I guess you could say. So if you can subscribe, that would be great. Total vanity metrics, so you don't have to subscribe. That's just that's for my own ego and self-defeatism. And Instagram, I'm usually there every single day on my Instagram stories. So that's the best way. I usually try to get back at DMs once I get through my list on the notification
Right.
icon, which I'm not very good at that. But yeah, that's the best way to get me. Instagram and YouTube for sure.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Sandi. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.